Good evening. Ooh, everything's loud tonight. Okay. Welcome to the Wellesley Free Library, and John had mentioned earlier that he is from Gloucester, and I have a feeling we have some visitors here from the North Shore, so thanks for coming down, coming out, supporting John and music at the Wellesley Library. We're happy to have you here. My name is Kathy. We have some information on the table about upcoming events. We're in between the seasons here, but on our website you'll see what is coming up in September, October, and November. Take a look at it and mark your calendars. Friends book sale is coming up. Information about that is on the table. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, you can do so on the table. And as we ask at every event, excuse me, give us your feedback. I'd love to hear how you enjoyed the event this evening. Tonight's performance is generously sponsored by the Friends of the Wellesley Free Libraries. It's the Friends support. The Friends supports the library in many, many ways, primarily through the book sale I just mentioned. And just grab that flyer and come. This room will be filled up with books. It's amazing for a couple of days. So come on out and support them. Now, I am very delighted to introduce tonight's guest. This is the last concert in our summer series. It's been a great series. Thanks for coming out. And tonight's guest is singer-songwriter Jon Waterman, who holds a master's degree in popular music history from Prescott College and a master's in psychology from Kaplan University. He has been performing professionally as a musician and songwriter for over 20 years. Jon's down-to-earth blend of blues, roots rock, and old-time jazz is influenced by the styles and sounds of artists such as the Rolling Stones, Graham Parsons, Hank Williams Sr., Johnny Cash, and a multitude of blues and early jazz performers. Whether on a recording or in a live show, Jon aims to tell stories, convey emotions, and above all, entertain. Let's give a warm, warm welcome to Jon Waterman.
Hi, thank you so much. Make sure this is all on now. Hello. Thank you so much for your patience. And thank you for coming out tonight. And thank you to Wellesley Free Library and to Kathy and Elise for setting this up. I'm going to do the taboo thing, and I'm going to make sure this is in tune while I'm talking because we had some technical difficulties. So, tonight we're going to explore and celebrate the roots of popular music in America. And that's so these are songs about music and songs about musicians, or songs that just have a backstory that helps to illustrate the story of popular music. And popular music could be the music that's, popular in small towns or a greater region or the whole country. And the story of popular music's a constantly evolving, living, breathing story. It's not fixed to historic instruments or to traditional interpretations or to songs that have been played the same way hundreds of times. There's room for new songs and new interpretations and new instruments playing old songs and new songs. And you're going to hear some new songs and a couple of old songs. So, throughout history, music was an experience that people had at social gatherings. And that started to change in 1877 when Edison invented the phonograph. And the first recordings came out on wax cylinders. Eventually those were replaced with shellac discs, and eventually those were replaced with vinyl discs, but the idea of recording onto wax stuck. And as the phonograph became more and more a household item, and as records and recordings became more and more common, and then as radio was introduced and radio stations started to play music, music became less of a social event and more of an experience that could be had at home by yourself. musicians had to find a way to adapt to that if they wanted to ply their trade and if they wanted to survive. And so they had to have their music pressed into wax, which is the name of the song, Press It in Wax. From the hills of eastern Tennessee came the sound of country jamboree, 'cause a man from Victor was in town, and he was looking for that authentic hillbilly sound. So he put an advertisement in the news, and the Mississippi brakeman came yodeling the blues. A family sang while an auto harp rang, and somebody said with a hillbilly twang, "Mr. Peter, here's a song you gotta hear, getting sung like they'd sing it around here. It came from a man who was laying down tracks, Mr. Peter. Won't you press it in wax?" And from the flatlands of western Tennessee, along the river running down to New Orleans, came a song where life's stories were told, as the church houses rocked and the big wheels rolled. And from Memphis the word got around that a man who ran a studio was looking for the sound that plucked the common thread of how life was led by the blacks and the whites. And then somebody said, "Mr. Phillips, there's a song you gotta hear, getting sung with a growl and a sneer. It came from the Negroes, been broken down shaft, Mr. Phillips. Won't you press it in wax?" And from the field came a holler, from the pulpits a shout, from the pews came the blues sung by those down and out. From the juke joints and jazz clubs and slums came the call, from where cotton grows tall to Carnegie Hall. "Mr. N, there's a song you gotta hear, that's bound to keep playing through the years, being sung by someone who might slip through the cracks, Mr. N. Won't you press it in wax?" Yeah, Mr. Lomax, here's a song you gotta hear, from a way of life that's all but disappeared, being sung by some prisoners with stripes on their backs, Mr. Lomax. Won't you press it in wax? Yeah, get from a hobo who was walking the tracks, Mr. Lomax. Won't you press it in wax? Thank you. Sound okay? Okay. Make sure you could hear the guitar. So that song mentions 5 individuals who weren't primarily known as musicians, but who had a big impact on popular music. Ralph Peer, Sam Phillips, John Hammond, and John and Ellen Lomax. You've probably heard of at least 4 out of the 5. You might not have heard of Ralph Peer. Ralph Peer was a talent scout for Victor Records. That was back in the 1920s. And he took his recording equipment down south because he wanted to record the music of the Southern Appalachians. He had this idea that people from rural areas would be more interested in buying records from artists they could relate to, people with a lifestyle and a background similar to their own. And it turned out that he was right, because in 2 weeks of recording sessions in Bristol, Virginia, and Bristol, Tennessee, same town, he discovered the Carter family and Jimmie Rodgers. That was 2 of the biggest superstars of American popular music, or 2 of the earliest ones. The other 4 in the song you probably know: Sam Phillips, founder of Sun Records, who discovered Howlin' Wolf and Elvis and a whole lot of other people. John Hammond, who discovered Benny Goodman and Billie Holiday and Bob Dylan and a whole lot of other people. And John and Ellen Lomax were the folklorists, father and son, and they conducted field recordings through the South and collected songs in the American oral tradition. And their work gave rise to the folk music genre that emerged in the 40s and 50s. In 1934, John and Ellen Lomax were in Sugar Land, Texas, conducting field recordings at the prison there. And they recorded a prisoner named Ironhead Baker, and he was singing a song called St. James Hospital. St. James Hospital is part of what's known as the rake cycle. That's a series of songs that are thought to have evolved from this 18th century English ballad called The Unfortunate Rake. Immigrants and settlers brought the unfortunate rake over to this country, and over time it evolved and it was adapted to the new surroundings, and it took on different forms. In Nova Scotia it became known as a bad girl's lament, and in the American West it became the cowboy bell, Streets of Laredo. What all the songs in the rake cycle have in common is they're all a series of requests from a dying character as to what he or she wants at his or her funeral. Stuff like play the fife lowly, beat the drum slowly, answer your cell phone out of the room, and have 6 jolly cowboys carry the coffin. And in the Jazz and Blues songbook, that song emerged as St. James Infirmary Blues. Sam went down to Old Joe's barroom on the corner of the square. All my friends, they were having drinks the same as usual. And the usual crowd was there. You know, on my left stood Big Joe McKennedy, and his eyes, they were bloodshot red. And he turned around and he faced all the people. And these were the very words that he said. He said, I went down to St. James Infirmary just to see my baby there. She was lying on a long white table, so pale, so cold, so fair. Oh, let it go, Oh, let her go. God bless her. Wherever she may be, 'cause I tell you, she may search this whole wide world all over, but she is never gonna find another man like me. And when I die low, oh, won't you lay down my body in my finest suit of clothes and a Stetson hat, put a $20 gold piece in my watch chain, so that the boys will all know that I died standing pat. Yeah, and I want 6 crap shooters to be my pallbearers, and I want a chorus girl to sing me a song, and I want a jazz band to play on my earth wagon. Let him raise hell as I roll along. That's so long. I said roll on out your rubber-tired carriage. Ah, yes, and put on your old-time hat, 'cause there's gonna be 12 men going on down to that graveyard. But there will only be 11 coming back. I let her go, let her go, let her go, let her go, let her go. God bless her. Wherever, oh, wherever she may be, 'cause she may search this whole wide world all over, but she is never gonna find another man like me. Thank you. So those of you who have a background in music probably noticed that St. James Infirmary is in a minor key. But the other songs in the rake cycle were not in a minor key. And a lot of musicologists and folklorists wondered how that could have happened, and some of them even started saying, well, wait a minute, maybe that's not really in the rake cycle after all. Somebody just stole some of the lines and stuck them in there to make it sound like it. But I think there's an explanation. It makes perfect sense to me. And that's that in Western music we use a 12-note scale. But not all musical traditions use a 12-note scale. Some, like African traditions, a lot of them use less than 12 notes in their scale, which means there's more space between the notes, which means in that space there can be sliding around, there can be bending of notes and blue notes and so on and so forth. So if a song gets passed back and forth between the 12-note system and another system, over time, depending on where people hear the emphasis of the notes and where people performing the notes emphasize the notes, it might change keys. Well, it turns out that you wouldn't know it from the history books and you wouldn't know it from Hollywood Westerns, but there were a lot of black cowboys. They estimate that about 1 in 4 cowboys was actually African American. And it makes perfect sense to me that these cowboys would have heard the songs being sung by other cowboys. They would have picked up songs relevant to the lifestyle they were leading, songs that meant something in their occupation, and they would have started singing those songs according to their own sensibility, and over time, maybe Streets of Laredo was one of those songs, and it might have drifted into a minor key. Well, if that was the case, we would expect there to be a version of Streets of Laredo, or a song like that, with those lyrics but in a minor key. And it turns out that St. James Hospital by Ironhead Baker is in a minor key and has lyrics similar to Streets of Laredo. So maybe that song is the missing link between this 18th century English ballad and St. James Infirmary Blues, which is kind of neat. But that brings up a whole other question. And a whole other guitar. Of where the blues came from. There's a historic site in Mississippi, and it's called Dockery Farms or Dockery Plantation. And this was a sharecropping plantation that sprang up after the Civil War. They grew cotton there. But the reason it's a historic site is because of some of the people who lived there. Charlie Patton, Willie Brown, Son House, Tommy Johnson, Robert Johnson, Pop Staples, Sonny Boy Edwards, Howlin' Wolf. You might not know who those people are, but they're all well-known Delta bluesmen. So because of that, a lot of people think of Dockery Farm as one of the birthplaces of the blues. Those guys all lived there around the same time, and they would have jam sessions late into the night and entertain themselves and the other tenants. According to legend, Charlie Patton learned how to play the guitar from a mysterious figure named Henry Sloan. We don't know much about Henry Sloan other than that he was a real person and they might have found his gravesite. Another legend says that Tommy Johnson and Robert Johnson both learned to play the guitar by selling their souls to the devil. It's kind of hard to confirm. I guess we're going to have to ask the devil. If anybody knows him. This is called Dockery Farm. The names of those blues guys are kind of scattered through the song in one form or another. Wait for me on Dockery Farm, and that's how I wound up here. The days turned into weeks and months, and now it's been more than a year. But I learned to work the fields and torn the soles straight from these shoes. On Dockery Plantation, harvesting the blues. Down on Dockery Plantation, you know the work don't ever stop. Cause it takes a lot of pain to raise that barbed and bitter crop. You can hear the pickers moaning, night and day you hear that sound. And the hurtin' don't have a season, cause the blues grow all year round. where to get a loan, and he'll teach you how to pick and how to barter with your soul. But when you're dealing with the devil, boy, you always wind up in the hole. Cause on Dockery Plantation, you can't go anywhere but down as you walk the fields tilled by Charlie Pat or Willie Brown. Switchblade knives and broken bottles, those are the tools they had to use to slide beneath the gravel when they harvested the blues. Just like anything that grows, the blues starts out as a seed. Could be loneliness or jealousy, prejudice and need, a cheating lover and a hungry wolf, howling outside your happy home. Those are the staples that you need to get the blues to start to grow. Now there's a house full of those bad seeds, and they pour out like a flood. And the air is thick as honey, boy, as you toil in the mud. Oh, it tears you up inside as your heart is being pruned. And even Johnson and Johnson won't stop the bleeding from their wound. See, on Dockery Plantation, there's a debt you gotta pay. You gotta ease the pain of others if you want to leave someday. But that means spending a lifetime feeling what it's like to lose. On Dockery Plantation, harvesting the blues. When I'm down in Mississippi, down on Dockery Farm, where people go when they're down and out, love has done them harm. I've been waiting for my woman, and I'm still waiting for some news. On Dockery Plantation, harvesting the blues. Yeah, on Dockery Plantation, harvesting the blues. Thank you. How we doing?
Good.
Doing good? Okay. There was a railroad song called Jerry Go Idle the Car. It became real popular among workers on the Southwest Santa Fe line back in the 1880s. And back around the turn of the last century, some folks were curious about the origins of the song. And they managed to track down the guy who was the manager of the Southwest Santa Fe line at the time the song was popular. And he recalled that the song was written by a worker on that line, known by no other name than Riley the Bum. Yeah. And Riley the Bum, according to this manager, was an Irish immigrant from Connaught, and he was, quote, a hardworking, quick-fighting, good-natured section man who was also a minstrel, end quote. And that's all we know about Riley the Bum. But we can kind of gather some information. Connaught was a part of Ireland hardest hit by the famine, and it was still suffering from the effects of the famine for years afterwards, so we can assume that, like a lot of his countrymen, Riley probably came to this country because of that tragedy. And he probably faced discrimination when he got here, like a lot of his countrymen did, and that forced him into the profession of railroad working, which wasn't an easy one. But with the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, they needed workers, and they probably weren't too inclined to discriminate, or less so, because they needed workers. And if we listen to the song, Jerry Go Out of the Car, we can hear it has an Irish kind of melody to it. And we can see that Riley brought the music of his background over here, made it relevant to his life here, and made it part of the popular music landscape of this country at the same time. So, because we know so little about Riley, I had to fictionalize a little bit this song. We won't tell anyone, except I just did tell you. And, to properly commemorate him and give him his place in that pantheon of American songwriters. So this is called Riley the Bum. He traveled across the ocean to America, 'cause the famine was severe where he was from. And he got a job working on the railroad, 'cause the era of the iron horse had come. Riley the Bum. He was known by the thick brogue that he spoke in, and the lilting melodies that he would hum. And when he was sore from working or from fighting, he would pour the whiskey down until he was numb. Riley the Bum. He was a minstrel and a section man on the Santa Fe, and he wrote a song called Jerry Go Out of the Car. And if people rode west on the tracks, he laid for a line. And the song he sang is a tie to another time. If he saw you rolling some tobacco, he might ask if you would lend him some. But he was never known to turn away someone in need. He would share if he was down to his last crumb. Riley the Bum. He was a minstrel and a section man on the Santa Fe, and he wrote a song called Jerry Go Island High. And the people rode west on the tracks that he laid for the line. And the song he sang is a tie to another time. Yeah, the song he sang is a tie to another time. Yeah, the song he sang is a tie to another time. Thank you. So there are two prominent and contradictory themes in American music. One is the bringing together of styles and influences from all these different parts of the melting pot, so to speak. The other is an arbitrary setting some aside, particularly Black Americans. Around 1830, an actor by the name of Thomas Rice created he put burnt cork on his face and created a character based on a song and dance he saw being done by a handicapped black stable hand. And that was the beginning of blackface minstrelsy. And the character he created was Jim Crow. And the song that went with the character was Jim Crow. And it was a whole lot of verses sung in black dialect to the tune of an old English melody. And besides being a cruel mockery, it was also an expression of anti-elitism. And so it resonated with the supporters of Andrew Jackson, and it became very popular. Thomas Rice became a very wealthy, famous man. He inspired hundreds of imitators, and minstrelsy went on to become a form of hateful propaganda, even more so as the debate over slavery intensified, and then even more than that after the Civil War. When art and music are used to spread hatred, the hatred becomes embedded in the culture, it becomes part of the culture. And then as time passes and generations pass, and hopefully as the hatred comes to be seen as evil and isn't acceptable anymore, the art and music and entertainment that was used to spread that hatred becomes repugnant. It can no longer be appreciated as art or music at all. It has to be filed away in a museum. It's just some grotesque, shameful historical oddity. And that's the case with this big body of American music called minstrelsy. What happened, and it's a complicated thing psychologically, but you had white performers simultaneously trying to imitate black performances while at the same time trying to degrade those performances. And over time, paradoxically, that led to an idealization of the black performances. But what was being idealized, the qualities being idealized, weren't attributed to individual artistry or passion or devotion or hard work on the part of black artists. They were attributed to irrelevant traits like skin color, hair, ethnic background, and that's racism, that's prejudice, when credit is taken away from an individual for their passion or hard work and instead assigned to a population based on a meaningless trait. And unfortunately, some of that is still with us. This song is called Thomas Rice and His Traveling Review. They're gathered at the Playhouse on the square. And on Main Street there's a murmur of excitement in the air. The people are buzzed because the show that's coming through is Thomas Rice and his traveling review. There's a smile in store for those of every age, as the wilds of Ethiopia are turned loose upon the stage. With a song and dance, so many more will be inspired to do by Thomas Rice and his traveling review. It's good for some fun for everyone. The spectacle will do the children fun. Good Christians will have themselves such a good time. Even the devil will join Mr. Rice will wheel and tap on his heels and on his toes. So come on, get your tickets. Don't miss your chance to catch Thomas Rice and his traveling review. You'll hear speeches by grand and eloquent buffoons and banjos that played their old plantation tunes. Jim Dandy will be there and listening on to with Thomas Rice and his traveling review. It's good for some fun filled with slapstick and puns. The legacy will do the children proud. Good Christians will laugh till their laughs turn to tears. Soon even the devil will be laughing out loud at how fiddler and tambo and bones, crudely colored by burnt cork and dark freakish tones, will be burned in the marrow of these people who've seen Thomas Rice and his traveling review. Thomas Rice and his traveling review. Thank you. There's a second theory on where the blues came from. The first is that it emerged out of the Mississippi Delta region and the field hollers and spirituals and African songs. The second theory suggests that it came out of black vaudeville and the theater circuit of the southeastern cities in the 1890s and early 1900s. There was a performer named Butler May who was incredibly popular on that circuit. He was the equivalent of a superstar in his day. The streets would be mobbed whenever he played. But he's hardly remembered now. And Butler May was a child prodigy. He played the piano. And while still in his teens, he was sharing the bill with artists like Ma and Pa Rainey and Jelly Roll Morton. People who, eyewitnesses who heard him play and who lived into modern times describe his sound as being sort of like Ray Charles, both his playing the piano and his singing. Butler May's signature number, well, it turned out, first of all, that he was a comedian also. And he was given the nickname String Beans because he was tall and thin. So pretty soon he was headlining his own shows. And he did this throughout the South, and then by 1914 he was taking his act up north. He was playing in Chicago and Indianapolis and Harlem. And he played a show at the Monogram Theater in Chicago that was the most prestigious venue on the black vaudeville circuit. And he played his signature number there. This was autumn of 1914, and his signature number, and he continued to play it for years after that, was a piece about the Titanic. It was a performance piece. And he would play the piano and sway back and forth at the piano as he played to imitate the rocking of the ship. And then he'd sing as he played the piano to imitate the sinking of the ship. And all the while he would sing out this story of how he was on the Titanic. But he was able to swim to safety because he had Elgin movements in his hips with a 20-year guarantee. Elgin was a watch brand, okay? And the movements are the mechanical parts of a watch. And Elgin watches were advertised as coming with a 20-year guarantee on the movements. That innuendo appears again and again in blues songs after that, okay, from Robert Johnson all the way up to Buddy Guy. And it's called the Elgin Movements metaphor. The audience, it was mostly black audiences, and they thought he was hysterical. They loved the piece, they loved him, and of course it wasn't lost on them that the Titanic supposedly did not allow black people on board, so it was seen as a symbol of white arrogance and prejudice. when Butler May played up north in the northern cities, they'd never seen anything like him before. He was spontaneous and he improvised and he was vulgar. And he got criticized by the black press for being too vulgar. They said he was too blue. Blue is a vaudeville term for being vulgar on stage. It's probably rooted in the blue laws. And maybe coincidentally, maybe not coincidentally, there were a lot of people that said that Butler May was the first bluesman. I gotta grab the other guitar to play it though. I tell these stories and then the stories are all in song anyway.
Stories are great.
But the song wouldn't make any sense if you didn't hear the stories. Maybe they would. It reinforces them. It's called Butler May. Montgomery, Alabama, on a hot summer day, just before the sun went down. A kid was playing piano on the back of a train, and a crowd of people gathered round to hear an old song that didn't seem so old. At the beginning of a story that'd be left untold, but if you listen, some say you might still know what he played today. His name was Butler May. Soon he was touring the South, playing a black vaudeville stage. He was tall and lean, and they called him string beans, and his act was all the rage. Wherever he played, he would draw a crowd, because the songs he wrote made people laugh out loud. Till the critics wrote in their reviews that Butler May was blue. Some say Butler May have been playing the blues the way the blues get played today. But he lived and died a long time ago, so nobody can really say. They said he was the funniest man alive, though he was hardly more than a kid. Some say Butler May have invented the blues, but no one really knows it. No one really knows it. From Atlanta to Louisville, from Chicago to Harlem, string beans brought the houses down. He sang the Titanic in a piano log, and he sang Alabama Bound. When he took the stage, people all agreed he had the kind of moves that were guaranteed. So the critics wrote in their reviews that Butler May was blue. From Jacksonville, Florida, one November day, came word that Butler May was gone. He was being pledged to a fraternal lodge when a hazing ritual went wrong. He was just 23, much too young. At the beginning of a song that would be left unsung. But if you listen, some say you might still know what he played today. Some say Butler May have been playing the blues the way the blues get played today. But he lived and died a long time ago, so nobody can really say. They said he was the funniest man alive, though he was hardly more than a kid. Some say Butler May have invented the blues, but no one really knows if he did or no. No one really knows if he did. Down in Georgia and Florida, he played on a bill with a raisin jelly roll. And up north in Chicago, a mob would gather on State Street whenever string beans did the stroll. Some say Butler May have invented the blues, but nobody can really say. Cause he never recorded or published his songs, and there's no one left who heard him play. They said he was the funniest man alive, though he was hardly more than a kid. Some say Butler May have invented the blues, but no one really knows if he did. No one really knows if he did, oh no. No one really knows if he did. So in the decade before Butler May, in the years before W.C. Handy, the guy they called the father of the blues, who wrote St. Louis Blues and all those other classics, this style started to emerge that music writers are now calling proto-blues. These were Tin Pan Alley ragtime songs that grew out of certain African American folk songs like Frankie and Johnny and Stack O'Lee. And the most prolific composer of these songs was a guy named Huey Cannon. Huey Cannon was a Tin Pan Alley songwriter. He came from the Detroit area, and he's best remembered for writing Bill Bailey, Won't You Please Come Home? And he started out playing in the saloons of Jackson, Michigan. And he probably also started out drinking in the saloons of Jackson, Michigan, because he was an alcoholic from a very early age, and that didn't turn out too well for him. He died an early death at the age of 35 in Toledo, Ohio. This is called Huey Cannon's Blues. We're going to tune this. So how about those Red Sox? Probably shouldn't talk about the Red Sox this year. How about those Patriots? They're off to an okay start, I think. Technical difficulties, snowball. Here we go. Huey Cannon's Blues. Now do you hear that old piano rolling out a ragtime melody from the bars where Huey Cannon used to play, to the rhythm of the shots of gin and whiskey going down, a good diamond song that still gets sung today, where the rounders and the railroad men, the gamblers and the whores told their stories from the darker side of life. And a kid at the piano heard a drunkard at the bar describe how he'd been tossed out by his wife. Now up on Tin Pan, Huey Cannon's got a song, and Mrs. Bailey's moaning all night long. She handed her a random man a pair of walking shoes. Now many minstrel knows the tune of Huey Cannon's Blues. And it's 60 miles from Detroit to Toledo. You can go that distance and away to choose. And there's a lot of men who've fallen going sideways down their road. And many minstrel knows the tune of Huey Cannon's Blues. From Jackson to Manhattan, Huey Cannon made his name, writing music for the publishers to sell. Some songs he wrote for parlors, and some songs he wrote for shows, and some nights he spent locked in a folding cell. Cause Huey Cannon had been drinking hard from the time he was a kid, and as a man his drinking drove away his wife. Oh, he drank away the songs he wrote in the money that he made. Then at 35 he drank away his life. But back on Tin Pan Alley, Huey Cannon had a song where a widow mourned a man who had done her wrong. That little head caught up with him Now many a minstrel knows the tune of Huey Cannon's blues. And it was 35 years from Detroit to Toledo, going by the way of pills and booze. And there's a lot of men who's calling, going sideways down that road. And many a minstrel knows the tune of Huey Cannon's blues. Yeah, many a minstrel knows the tune of Huey Cannon's blues. Won't you come home, Bill Bailey? Won't you come home? I'm on the whole night long. Yeah, I'll do the cooking, honey, and I'll pay the rent. I know I've done you wrong. Remember that rainy night I threw you out with nothing but a fine good home. Why lies the blue and let us shine the beat. Won't you please come home? You know you want to sing it, right? You do. You're not going to make me twist your arm. So we'll start again this time. Ready? Won't you come home to the man? Won't you come home? I'm on the whole night long. I'll do the cooking, honey, and I'll pay the rent. I know I've done you wrong. Remember that rainy night I threw you out with what a fun. In 1865, not that long ago, right? We remember that. In 1865, a songwriter named Henry Work wrote a song called The Ship That Never Returned. No? Okay, that's all right. Well, a few years later, within a few years, the song became very popular, and within a few years, there were takeoffs in the song involving other modes of transportation that never returned. Well, then in 1903, there was this wreck of a mail train near Danville, Virginia. Remember that? No. Anyway, it happened. Trust me. And one of the guys helping out with the recovery effort happened to be a musician. And he and a friend who was also a musician co-wrote a song that was a takeoff, another takeoff on a ship that never returned, but about this accident. And that was Wreck of the Old 97, which you might have heard of. No? Really? You've probably heard of Charlie on the MTA. Okay. Which is based on Wreck of the Old 97. So now you know, and that's why the subway car never returned, or Charlie never returned, whatever it is. But Wreck of the Old 97 is the train song that came from. So, the two guys that wrote the song each went their own way. But they both remembered it. One of them played it for a friend years later, who years after that remembered it and played it for another friend named Henry Witter, who recorded it. This was 1923. And a popular singer at the time named Vernon Dalhart heard the recording, and he recorded it himself. This was 1925 now. And he used it as a B-side for a Prisoner's song, and it went on to sell 1 million copies. Yeah. And so Victor Records, that was the label it went out on, promptly got sued for copyright infringement by another musician who's not even in the picture yet. It wasn't even one of those other ones who claimed to have written the song. And it's a really fascinating case if you read. There's all kinds of really silly, funny stuff that happened. But to make a long story short, Victor Records ended up hiring this Harvard folklorist to trace the origins of the song. And that's how we know all this, and all this that happened. The success of the song sparked this craze for event songs, which were songs about storms or train wrecks or mining disasters or kids falling into wells. And they all, sensational news items that told the story in the news and then had a little moral at the end. I'm going to play a record of the old 97. But because so many people have played it, I'm doing something a little different with it, because new interpretations. And everybody always does it the same way, and it's a good way. But I wanted to try something new. Well, Steve turned around and he said to his greasy, dirty fireman, he said, just shovel on a little more than coal. Oh, yes, and when we cross that White Oak Mountain, you can watch old 97 roll. Well, it's a mighty rough road from Lynchburg to Danton, with a line on a 3-mile grade. Oh yes, and it was on that very grade that he lost his air brakes in service. What a jumping was he made. Well, he was going down the road and making 90 miles an hour when it whizzed up into a stream. Oh, he was found in the rut with his head on the throttle and started to death by the sea. So ladies, oh ladies, you must all take one from this time on in love. Don't you ever speak no harsh words to your true loving husband, man. I'll leave you and never return. So the train played a big part in the history of this country, of course. And it also played a big part in the history of the music of this country. One of the early superstars, Jimmie Rodgers, remember him, I mentioned him earlier, was known as the singing brakeman because he had been a railroad worker before he got TB, and it made him retire. He had to retire because of that, and go back to what he really liked doing, which was playing music and entertaining people. Jimmie Rodgers came from a railroading family in Meridian, Mississippi. So he grew up hearing the stories of the train yards and the music of the black railroad workers. And that shaped his own music and influenced him. And even though after he died, they called him the father of country music, his music was as much blues as it was this sort of country mix of sentimental ballads and, train songs and hobo songs. And Rodgers himself was influential not just on country, but on blues and then later rock and roll. And he inspired more than a generation of artists, from Gene Autry and Howlin' Wolf to Hank Snow and Elvis and Bob Dylan. So this is called Ride with Jimmie Rodgers. Let me hop aboard a boxcar up in heaven when I die, so I can hear that brakeman singing as we roll across the sky, and listen to the blues pour through the clouds way down below. Let me ride with Jimmie Rodgers when I go. Rock me to the rhythm of the rails when I sleep. Let that whistle serenade my wandering soul. Let it blow. I wanna ride upon that line that runs for all eternity. Oh, let me ride with Jimmie Rodgers when I go. Yes, let me ride with Jimmie Rodgers up in heaven when I'm gone. Let my universe be music, put my breath in every song, so I can roll along like the ripples in the Mississippi flow. Oh, let me ride with Jimmie Rodgers when I go. Rock me to the rhythm of the rails when I sleep. Oh, let that whistle, let it serenade my wandering soul. Yeah, let it blow. Don't you know I wanna ride upon that line that runs for all eternity. Oh, let me ride with Jimmie Rodgers when I go. Yeah, let me ride with Jimmie Rodgers when I go. Yodelay, yodelay, oh. Yodelay, yodelay, oh. Yodelay, yodelay, oh. Yodelay, yodelay. Thank you very much. So Jimmie Rodgers was he was an innovative performer. He incorporated new styles into his work, and he even recorded with black artists, and this was back when the music industry was still segregated. He even recorded with Louis Armstrong, bringing jazz into the mix, and he also recorded with a Hawaiian steel guitar player, and that's why they have steel guitar in country music. The steel guitar was invented by a guy named Joseph Kakuku. He was a Hawaiian schoolboy. This was in 1889. The story goes that he was carrying his Spanish guitar home, and he saw a metal bolt lying on the ground. And he picked up the bolt, and it brushed against the strings, and gave him this idea for this new technique of playing. And he developed that technique, and it was probably that technique that was very influential on the blues, which uses slide guitar also. And the blues guitarist Son House, who was a slide player, said he learned to play guitar from a Hawaiian guitar player. So you get Hawaiian guitar helped shape the blues as we now know, the blues, and the blues came out of the field hollers and spirituals and African songs, or if the idea that the blues came from black vaudeville is right, the blues came from the black folk songs and ragtime songs that also gave birth to the proto-blues. It had been formed of Tin Pan Alley, which had been formed by Irish and Jewish immigrants. But it doesn't really matter because the music of the city reached the country and the music of the country reached the city. And it all ended up all over the place. Country music was formed by old Appalachian folk songs that really were old parlor songs or old broadside ballads or old minstrel songs mixed with the blues. And ragtime was a mix of African rhythms and Latin rhythms and European marches. Jazz was a mix of blues and ragtime and Italian music and Latin music, and then later Tin Pan Alley Jewish music. And rock was a mix of country and blues, and then Latin music and Caribbean music and African music and world music. But all those are labels, and labels don't really matter. What music does is it's songs. It's about songs that mark the events in our lives, and they tell our stories, and that's what popular music is. And it doesn't need labels. So, back in a number of years ago, can't get this in tune. I'm gonna wait till I'm through with the story. Then I'll do it. Damn it. A number of years ago, I used to play in nursing homes. Okay, and I played in one place, and a woman asked to hear Stardust, the Hoagie Carmichael tune, old standard. And after the show, she said that the reason that she requested Stardust is because back during the war, World War II, her and her partner would go to dance to the big bands, and the last song of the night, the last dance of the night, they would play Stardust. And then he was off to war, and he didn't come back. And so to this day, to that day, this was some years ago, she requested Stardust in his memory. And this is called Last Dance of Stardust. Once it's in tune. And it will be in tune. You've heard of that song, right? Starbucks? Yeah. My last sip of Starbucks, last dance of Stardust. Except it's Pete's. I like Pete's better. I'm going to leave you with this. Band was playing Stardust as they danced on the floor. When the dance was over, he was off to war. The next day she was over here and he was over there. It was a last dance to Stardust that they shared. She read the letter that he sent as he marched towards Rome. She read the letter saying he was never coming home. She prayed that there was some mistake, that somehow he was spared. But it was a last dance to Stardust that they shared. Last dance to Stardust, living in her memory. The last dance to Stardust that haunts her reverie. And the sound of winds and violins will always fill the air of a last dance to Stardust that they share. Now people come into this world and people pass away, but the music that they made for an eternity will stand like a ripple on the ocean, like a true love once declared, like a last dance to stardust that they shared. Last dance to stardust, vivid in her memory. The last dance to stardust that haunts her every. And the sound of winds and violins will always fill the air of the last dance to stardust that they share. And she said to me, this memory I can't let disappear. She asked me, won't you play that song from way back when I long to hear? Once more in 1943, and his last dance to stardust with me. His last dance to stardust with me. Sometimes I wonder why I spend lonely nights the melody haunts my reverie, and I am once again with you. Though I dream in vain, in my heart it will remain my stardust melody, the memory of love's refrain. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kathy and Elise and Wellesley Library for having me, and thank you for your patience with the technical difficulties we had earlier.